of technology, we can't seem to settle on anything.
I'm back.
All right. Hello
Nice.
there, dearies. Welcome to a very special episode of Undersampled Radio, episode 71. I am your host, Fernando Ziegler. Today we have an awesome episode for you guys. On the show, we have the relatively unknown Matt Hall of Agile Geoscience and Graham Gansel of Expero, known for their massive online presence, their work organizing hackathons worldwide, their influence within the Software Underground Slack team, which you can find on softwareunderground.org, and their work on this Undersampled Radio podcast. So today we have this awesome show where I've gotten about 14 people asking questions. So today I'm here to interview you guys. First, not really a question, but more of a request. Matt, can you do a thick New Orleans accent? Graham, can you do a thick British accent?
Go. Oh, yes. Go.
You first.
Wait. Let me do the accent first, and then I'll tell you the embarrassing story that goes along with it. Embarrassing for Matt, not for me. Hello, Matt here. This is my British accent, by the way. We're down under. Apparently, my British accent sounds Australian.
That sounds awful.
Yeah. Oh, wait, the story. Wait. Let me tell you the story.
Oh,
okay.
When we first started, and we may have told this on the show once or twice before, and in fact, we may have introed the show once before with this. When we were planning Undersampled Radio before the 0th episode, I had to build some audio assets as placeholders to see how the all the pieces would fit together, and Matt was busy doing something important, so I just recorded his bit in my Australian, British, whatever that was accent, and the recording still exists today, so we need to find that. I put it out there.
But we did change it, did we?
We did. As far as I know, we did.
Yeah. I'm not very good at regional accents.
Come on
now. New Orleans.
I'll give you that freebie.
Can I'd like to hear Graham do New Orleans, and then I'll see if I can.
Hey, Sha, why don't you come get some gumbo? That's how Cajuns speak.
I'm pretty sure.
What does Sha mean?
I can see us insulted.
Well, now I've insulted the entire continent of Europe and most of Louisiana. Sha means, hey, baby.
All right.
Well, so basically, I just wanted to start off with that, just kind of as an icebreaker.
Wait, you're going to let him dodge that bullet?
I told you. I'll
do the rest of the show. And how about this? I'll answer every question in a different accent. You like that?
All right. All right. So just to kind of get started, I have a series of questions, and they kind of go from the easier, how you got here, to again, I guess a little bit more general, easier questions to what you guys are doing now, and then what a lot of people call the more serious, hopefully I can get a rant started. I have a lot of questions, and like I said earlier today, there was 14 people that submitted questions. So with all the questions that I do have, I don't think I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to be able to ask all of these. So I do want to go ahead and apologize to our viewers if I don't get to your questions. I'll try to get to them. If I can't, I can't. I'll post all the questions on the show notes, and then maybe Graham or Matt want to do a post about some of these answers or whatnot. So I'll leave that up to them.
This is like the lightning round.
It is. So first question, and this is mostly for Matt. I guess to some of our listeners, a lot of this started with Agile Geophysical, which is now Agile Scientific. How did that get started, and how did you and Evan meet? And then eventually, how did you and Graham meet?
Right. Well, I actually met Evan at a conference. I'm not sure what year it would have been, but like late 2000s, and liked him immediately. We got on, and I was working in oil sands at the time at ConocoPhillips, and suggested that I can't quite remember, but he ended up applying for a job, and we in fact offered him a job. But unfortunately, he couldn't take it because his wife had got a residency in Halifax at the Children's Hospital. She's at the time was a training pediatrician. She's now a pediatrician, and so we weren't able to hire him. And I remembered this, so that happened in like 2007, something like that. And then I guess for various reasons, my wife and I had sort of lived in Calgary for 10 years. Been ConocoPhillips for 5 years, fancied a change. We decided to move to Nova Scotia. It was a bit random. To be honest, I can't really totally explain that decision. And when we did that, I was like, oh, right, now I'm going to have to find a way to make a living. And essentially, I tried to keep my job at ConocoPhillips. I said, like, can I move to Nova Scotia and still work here? And they were like, no. So I formed a company, started it essentially the day we arrived in Nova Scotia, and remembered Evan, and that he was in Halifax. Called him and said, I've started this company. I don't know what it is. Do you want to come work for me? And amazingly, he said yes, and also worked for me for probably 2 or 3 months before he even got paid, which was pretty awesome of him, and something I'll never forget. And here we are. So that was in 2010, late 2010.
Does that mean you owe him back pay?
I don't wonder if I ever did.
The power of compound interest.
Okay, just writing a sticky note to myself.
I hope he's not watching this, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, Evan's a unique individual, and Agile's done amazing things, I think, for a tiny company, in large part due to his energy and enthusiasm. Yeah, and then Graham, I guess we met in New Orleans in 2015, I want to say.
No, I don't know. I thought it was the end of 2014. It doesn't matter.
Somewhere like that. At SCG, we were doing the hackathon, and I got in touch with Graham actually through LinkedIn, and was like, "Hey, can you help me find people to come to this hackathon?"
And I was like, "No, but I'll point you to the beer aisle,
and I'll be there." So yeah, that was 2015, and when did we start the podcast? Was it
6 months later?
Last episode you said 2 years ago.
Yeah. So there must have been like literally 3 or 4 or 5 months after we met. How's that for a flash in the pan romance?
Nice. That answers the question, and actually you answered another question along the way. This was more for Graham.
You're welcome.
How did you jump into geophysics? I guess you came from a pure physics background. How did you get into geophysics?
First, let me start by saying thank you for having me on the show. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you to my mom for all the encouragement over the years. Geophysics was a natural extension.
Not your dad? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know. I feel like I don't watch many award shows, but I feel like there's a lot of mothers thanked.
Okay.
Are there a lot of fathers thanked? We should do a data science project where we figure out the family numbers rankings of appreciation. What was
all right, I'm sorry.
Geophysics.
Go back. So physics to geophysics.
Yeah. So as you can see, I am highly distractible, and I like to work on new shiny things. And one of those new shiny things I found one day was inverse problems. Woo! So this was during undergrad, and I started picking around with some wave propagation stuff, doing inversion problems using wave propagation system of equations. And I bumped into a friend of a friend of a friend at a football game. We started talking about, this is the South. We meet everybody at football games, right? we started talking about geophysics and how he wanted some help with some of the math stuff that he was doing. So I showed up at his office the next Monday and said, "Hey, I can do that." And he said, "Well, come on in." So that was it. That was all she wrote.
So that kind of goes into the follow-up question that the same listener had. When you made your transition, I mean, did you have to learn a whole new thing with geoscience, or do you think it's all the same to you and just with rocks?
I should have learned this whole new thing called geology, but instead of doing that, I kind of munged my way along learning little bits and bobs. The guy that I was working for was a geologist, classically trained in sequence strat. I don't remember what his graduate school was in, but he taught me about rocks while I taught him about math, which is why that relationship worked out so well and why I stuck around afterwards.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And everybody has their story. I mean, my background's in physics, and I jumped into geophysics. And the only reason I did that is because I lost the bet. But we're not talking about me.
That's in football games, man.
So that's another story. So to follow on with our interview here, now it goes to the easier questions. This is for both of you. What profession, other than your chosen one, would you have liked to attempt, or do you see yourself doing?
Sorry, I missed the key part of that statement.
What profession, other than the one you're doing right now, would you like to attempt doing, or do you see yourself doing?
Profession, I see. Stunt driver. Next question. Matt, you tried a couple other things, right?
Did I? What are you thinking of? Not that time in the
Red Bull Air Race is what I was thinking of.
Who?
Red Bull Air Race. Sorry, hold on. Okay, so one more digression. If you look up Matt Hall on Google, the Red Bull Air Race pilot comes up first, and then you see Matt Hall of Nova Scotia.
Hey, and he's the same age as me. Like, we're very close in age. I feel like maybe we got switched at birth.
So I have a serious answer to this question, which is that I am doing something different now. So we were talking about geophysics, but I don't do geophysics anymore. And I'm very excited about that. I'd been talking to Matt about this for a while now. I was getting a little bit jaded or distanced from enthusiasm in the geophysical space for a few years. And when I started playing with more statistical methodologies, but machine learning specifically, I found myself reading less and less geophysics and reading more and more archive, right, and things related to deep learning. So I think my serious answer to your question is that I would like to try doing what I'm doing now, which is deep learning, machine learning, data science.
All right.
Nice. Yeah.
Matt, do you have any profession?
Well, I don't know. My first sort of reaction was that I tend not to see my career, definitely, but any career really, as being that clearly defined, so that you might say I'm this or I'm that. Because my first thought was, well, I like to just try random things, easily distracted, I guess, like Graham. But actually, there was another path that I don't like to say I almost took, because it's not like I went to college for 3 years and studied it or anything. But I mean, the sort of other path that I was interested in as a teenager was typography, and I'm still a bit of a sort of typography enthusiast, I suppose, and spent many hours as a teenager drawing typefaces and it's taking care of my rotarings, things like that. I was kind of obsessed with the repeater graphs and drawing film and the utensils of that craft. And one of the reasons I love geology actually was making maps and drawing on drawing film very carefully with lots of messy ink. And at one point it looked like that whole profession, not cartography, well, maybe cartography as well, those professions looked really threatened by digital sort of revolution or whatever. In fact, I think I saw something the other day that was like, was it XKCD or something? It was like time and like typographic quality in books and reports. And it went through this really rough patch in the 90s where computers were rubbish, basically. And so people were using awful fonts and no design sense whatsoever. I mean, remember websites in like the 90s. And now, of course, it's turned around and there's probably more type designers today than there've ever been.
It's like you have a problem against Comic Sans or something. I don't know why.
I actually don't get overexcited about if that's you trying to start a rant. I don't.
It's not at all.
I don't actually get overexcited about Comic Sans or any fonts. So maybe I'm not a real typographer. But yeah.
So going from there, and I mean, I don't know, I guess you kind of talked about perhaps trying to attempt doing it or whatnot, but I don't know how far you ever got, but maybe kind of related or not related. What accomplishments are you mostly proud of? Are they related to typography, cartography, or?
My professional accomplishment, I just sort of find it hard to think about my career in terms of accomplishments. My kids are my best accomplishment by a long way. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty pleased about how the books that we've done turned out. Those were a complete unknown, and I've enjoyed working on those, and I hope we managed to do some more because they're not very easy. But yeah, I'm really proud of what we've done with Agile. But I mean, that's pretty self-centered. But you know, I like how it looks like. Sorry, I was just going to say I like how it looks like a bigger thing than it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
I think
is that the kind of the opposite of a TARDIS?
It looks bigger than it is because you guys touch so many people's projects and interests and professions.
Those allegations were never proven.
So it is bigger than it seems. I mean, you do an awesome job. Keep on.
Okay, well, that's the compliment I was fishing for. So thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
How about you, Graham? I mean, what accomplishments are you? What accomplishments are you mostly proud of? I mean, going back to the stuff that you've been doing.
Translation. I'm most. I guess I'm maybe not the most proud, but the most satisfied that I never dove in too deeply to any one thing. This is something that actually Chris and Matt and I have talked about before, but you get either, you're the master of none, the jack of all trades, right? So I like to exist in a space where I can translate between fields or ideas or professions or whatever it is. And I enjoy highlighting that to other people, doing it in a public facing way, right? So whether that's like explaining deep concepts to customers or presenting deep concepts in a fun way to specialists, public facing translation. That's what I'm proud of.
Do you think it's underrated, that sort of jack of all trades skill set, if that's a skill set? It's like
it's the anti-skill set.
Yeah, it's a non-superpower.
No, and I certainly would never recommend that anyone attempt to go down that path. The good stuff is in the details, right? But
I don't know.
I don't know. Staying on top of some of the depth and working your way across it is interesting too.
to piggyback on that question for both of you again, what are you not very good at?
Nice.
Depth.
Nice question. Why don't we ask these good questions on our show? Matt, you go first.
Well, it's definitely depth and focus. I mean, that you know, I'm not only. I mean, it's not that I'm not good at it. I'm incapable of it. You know, it's like saying I'm not good at you know, free diving. I mean, yeah. And I suppose I feel a sort of slightly rueful, like I do feel like that. I wonder, or a ping pong between feeling like it's a bug and a feature, right? So I admire people who have the focus and capacity, intellectual capacity, that's completely different from whatever intellectual capacity I have, to stick at something and dig into it year on year. Yeah, going with that. Sorry, Graham, if that's feel like
Thanks
I feel like we
answer, man.
Yeah.
Second worst thing. Sales.
Oh yeah, good one.
Past 3 years have been hard for me, man. I've been just trying to sell, you know, and just getting shut down a lot. And I guess that's just part of the trade. And I just got finished saying that I enjoyed doing this public facing translation thing. But when you do it so many times and you know, you get a 0 instead of a 1 or whatever, it begins it begins to feel like this, you know, you need to upgrade something. So 2018, in fact, this is one of my non-New Year's resolutions or whatever, but 2018 is I'm actively learning to sell better.
Okay.
And I'm doing that from people who are better than me in that field.
Yeah, there's definitely it is a real skill, and I've met the kind of sales folks that I really admire, and others that are really good at it, but I don't admire.
Yep.
If you know what I mean, you know, because there is a sort of type of salesperson who will do and say anything. I mean, you know, it's remarkable actually. It's almost, I mean, it is essentially like a social disorder. That has amazing, or can have amazingly powerful, positive, impactful results on a company, but is not necessarily, you know, building awesome relationships or anything. But I have met great salespeople who have maintained integrity at the sort of things that I care about. Yeah, it's a real. I sort of got into a bit of sales when I was at Landmark Halliburton, and didn't enjoy it. Like Graham, I'm horrible at it. I'm not a business person at all. I have no.
Well, I don't mean just sales for a company. I mean persuasive, and like on-air persuasive, argumentative capability. I mean, like the problem for me is that I'm a chit chatter. Like I want to. That's why we have this stupid radio show. Like I want to hear what people are doing and like find out about the details and stuff. But getting to the end, quantifying the end goal and getting there sometimes is a stretch.
Yeah. I wouldn't classify you as a chit chatter though. There's more. No, because I feel like a chit chatter doesn't really care about the content of the conversation, but I think that is important to you. And because actually I would say it's a feature of certain kinds of salespeople that they are supreme chit chatters, and all the chit chat is butter, and do you know what I mean? Like it's I don't want to say vacuous, but I mean it's empty, and to
me it's not one-sided. That's how I feel. I mean it's
right.
I mean, just going back to what you were saying, like we can actually have a conversation and build up on it. So
totally. And so conversation is different from chit chat, I think. Just, you know, don't give yourself a hard time, Graham.
Well, I'm perfectly fine with being a chit-chatter. I like it.
What scares you?
What is this? The Inquisition?
These are the easy questions. I'm not there.
These are the easy questions.
My word.
This is ridiculous.
I will let the person
stunt driving.
Stunt driving.
Matt, come on, you
well,
did so well.
I mean, well, I don't like scary movies. I don't watch horror movies. And you know, not to. I mean, the things that keep me awake at night, I guess. I mean, obviously, anything to do with my kids, I'm very sensitive about that. Kind of take after my mother in that regard, unfortunately. And business-wise, I mean, I probably do stress out more than I ought to about business stuff. Like 2014 was brutal. Yeah, or was it 15? I can't remember. But the year of the downturn was I didn't enjoy at all. It didn't go well with my personality, and
that's why we became friends.
Yeah, right. I hate having to worry about cash flow and stuff, and it's the one thing that I really struggle with Agile. Actually, is sort of the temptation of the capacity that growing brings you, but completely tempered, almost entirely tempered by the thought of having like monthly payroll in the kind of many digits, so that if you miss sales, like, people are losing jobs, and that's having a massive impact on people's lives. And I massively admire people who have built companies where dozens of people are employed, like people like Sebastian and Eric Jones, Enthought, where it's like $1 million plus payrolls, and it just must be incredibly hard. Yeah.
So I guess kind of piggybacking on that and going into our next segment about what you guys are doing now.
Wait,
you mentioned
what?
Agile.
What are we doing next at Agile, Matt?
Well,
what are we doing next? I got to even wear an Agile badge at the last hackathon. But they gave me one.
One of the big things that happens with Agile, like, you have an incredible blog that you have a lot of followers. What is that process that goes behind your blogging?
Yeah, let's call it a process. Yeah. I mean, I've been at the beginning. Okay, at the beginning, it was an absolutely. It was the thing I was looking forward to most about not working at an oil and gas company. Weirdly, although actually I later found out there were bloggers at ConocoPhillips. Mikhail Araya, who's a sedimentologist, had been blogging for quite a while, it turned out, on like Romanian geology and wine and stuff. I don't think she's doing it anymore. Anyway, I felt restricted by my employment and couldn't wait to blog. And I just had, I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating to say hundreds of things I wanted to write. It's incredibly vain and self-important of me. But okay, let's put it this way. The things that I wanted to share, I was desperate to, and I was driven and essentially had to hold myself back. And now I don't want to say it's a chore, but I still have 150 draft posts or something waiting to be written or half written or just notes or whatever, that I can't, that I do want to share. I've sort of raised the bar on myself a bit. Like, the posts are a lot harder to write now. I was satisfied with a couple of paragraphs in the beginning, and now it's like there's references and I'm drawing diagrams, and
diagrams will kill you.
Yeah, like writing multiple notebooks and stuff. So I do need to keep an eye on that. But I find it, I don't know, I find it very satisfying. I love connecting with people through the blog, and I get emails about having helped someone. I absolutely love that. That's what I live for, basically.
Well, so aside from the blogging, there was multiple questions on this. A lot of our listeners want to know how you guys manage juggling a company or doing blogs or running hackathons or keeping a huge social media presence, maintaining various open projects and still manage to have a life. How do you guys do it? Where do you get this energy from?
Well, I don't know. I think we're both just energetic people. It's not something. I mean, Matt's extracurricular activities are really curricular activities.
Yeah.
My extracurricular activities try to be curricular activity. They try to, you know, I would like them all to focus on projects that generate revenue eventually. And in most cases, when I'm picking projects to do, there's at least some tangential aspect of the whatever it is, blog post or open source code that I'm writing or whatever, that I can use later on for making money. And then just lots of coffee.
Yeah, I don't even drink coffee anymore. Don't know what's wrong with me.
Seriously, I mean, 4 different people asked about that in general. How you guys managed to do so many things. So
I don't know. You know what? I actually just think part of it is persistence masquerading as productivity. I mean,
yeah, pure stupidity. I think.
Yeah. Like if you keep something up for long enough, it starts to look like you produce a lot, but it's actually just like, no, I've just been doing this for a really long time. I mean, I think that's part of it, you know. And the other thing is I don't spend a lot of time doing a lot else, to be honest. I mean, if I'm not at here, you know, at my computer working, I'm, you know, working on the books or hacking around on other things. Don't really watch TV. I only work on planes. Like like when I'm traveling, all I do is work basically. And I say that, but there was a bunch of stuff on Twitter this week about academics, I guess, showing off about working 60 hours a week or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and I get the reaction against that because it sounds ridiculous and it's unhealthy and so on. But I bet a substantial number of those academics, and I would count myself as one of these people, they just don't think of it as work. It's just, it's not work. And I when I'm doing my like going through receipts and doing my expenses and stuff for a client, that's work, yeah. But I don't do more than a few hours of that a week. And everything else I do, I'm basically just messing about.
That's the thing. That's the thing I like best about being over here at Expiro. Yeah, I don't have to. I get to do all that fun stuff, and I don't have to like write invoices and deal with accounting.
So well, and actually, so a book that another book that people kind of react against a bit is the 4-Hour Work Week. Can't remember the guy's name, Tim something, because I think it downplays the idea that you should apply yourself to something, and some people see it as kind of being in the opposite of being a craftsman, because it's very kind of opportunist. But and I consider myself something of a craftsman as a scientist kind of thing, because I work at my craft, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and you know, I like the idea of getting better at things. But the 4-Hour Work Week changed how I thought about my time. So other things that I never do is I don't repair stuff around the house. I don't do things in the garden. I'm not very good at those things. I don't enjoy them. And it's better for me to use money to pay people to do that stuff. So that could potentially frees a massive amount of your time. I mean, basically, I value my time at like $200 an hour. And that's like, if I'm spending time on something and it's, that sounds really kind of stupid when I say it out loud, but I mean, it's a way of making decisions about what you spend your time on, right?
Yeah, I think that's hugely important. Yeah, I mean, certainly everybody who has been or is self-employed is thinking along those exact same lines. But I think that it's also important for employees to think that way, because your time it really is worth more than money even. I mean, it's worth productivity, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And not even just productivity towards something that a company is doing, but product, like actual stuff that is valuable for people. So yeah, I agree. I cut out, and I operate the same way as you, man. I cut out things that are inefficient.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, I just like, you know, I just spent 45 minutes before coming here reading Harry Potter to my son. Obviously, that is not a financial transaction. I derive more than $200 an hour worth of pleasure and satisfaction out of doing that, you know, just in case people are thinking, wait a second, this doesn't work out. Why do you sleep? But yeah, it's just it's a kind of a, what would you call it, like a mind hack or whatever, to think about what you spend time on. Yes. I'm totally with Graham though on that thing about employees. I mean, you look at, oh man, I mean, when I think back at the time he suspended meetings, I mean, it blows my mind. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say there's 20 hours a week. Like if you're in any kind of supervisory role, doing anything like, you know, I was like an advisor. I mean, a lot of that time is unproductive. You know, I'm not going to say all of it is, because good stuff happens in meetings occasionally and some of them are important, but boy, we burn time on stuff like crazy in a corporate environment.
Okay. Well, so speaking of from getting a lot of energy and stuff like that, one of the very successful things that the two of you have managed to do was to come up with this hackathon that it's been going around for a couple of years now.
Not me. That was all Matt.
So that's all Matt. Point being is that, I mean, how did that process come about? Like, where did the idea of like, okay, not only am I doing blogging and running a company, but hey, let's do a hackathon as well. And listeners want to know when the next ones are.
Don't I? I feel like I'm a broken record on the hackathons, but yeah,
Salt Lake City.
Yeah, next one's Salt Lake in May. They're all on.
And I guess there's one in Copenhagen, right?
And then there's Copenhagen in June, and there'll be one in Anaheim, I think, at just before SEG.
One of our listeners wanted to know when's the next one in Calgary.
Yeah, Calgary has been a little bit neglected. Don't know why. We found it. Well, we actually we've made stuff fly in Calgary. I don't know why we don't spend more time there. Actually, we never get any clients there. We've had like one client in Calgary. I don't get it. I kind of try not to take this personally because I lived and worked there for 10 years, but we just get no work there. I wish we were there more often.
But I mean, at one point, how did they come about though? That's
well, we I guess Agile started off being quite interested in knowledge sharing. That was kind of how we made our first dollar, and I was very into knowledge sharing for many years, having been involved in the geophysics network at Conoco, and you know, that's really where the blogging and the social media stuff came from. I mean, it was this desire to connect and have conversations. So we ran an event at the CSPG conference in May 2013, and we asked a room full of people, what are the big unsolved problems in subsurface geoscience? And we had this half-a-day conversation, and at the end of it, we wanted to do something. So we sort of stood up and said, you know, that's awesome. We've got this list. We put it on the web. And we wanted to openly and publicly commit to starting to attack these problems. And the best way we could think of attacking them was to do a hackathon. So that's how the first hackathon happened that fall in Houston. Was basically as a sort of response to that session. But I mean, hackathon, I don't know when the first hackathon was, but I mean, they've been around obviously for a lot. Like, we certainly didn't come up with the idea of hackathons by any stretch.
I completely understand. I think in general wanted to know more about your hackathons, but
I have a news bullet point here. This is hot off the press, and Matt, I think you'll be pleased to hear this. Expiro is partnering with Our Ladies Austin to throw a Women in Tech hackathon here in Austin sometime. And we think it's good. So it'll probably be in the summer, location TBD. Okay. Nothing has been scheduled yet, but we'll keep you up to date here on Undersampled Radio and all over social media. So it's going to be an awesome event. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, that's great.
So I guess now going to the more serious questions, since going back from that question about the hackathons, you said, I guess at one point, part of the reason the hackathons came up was because people had issues or had problems with particular things. And when it's solved, and then eventually the whole idea of using a hackathon came about. Now, it seems like you have success with these hackathons. So there are problems or there are issues that our industry currently has. So if there was one thing that our oil industry, if there's one thing you could change, what would it be?
Yeah, Graham. Go on, Graham.
Well, he wasn't kidding about the hard questions.
I mean, there's definitely.
I feel like I'm going to steal Matt's answer if I say the thing that I was going to say.
No,
but he stole my answer.
No, for a little bit. Forced me to come up with something else.
Yep, he stole my previous answer, so I'm going to use it because I truly believe in it. I think the biggest thing, and this is not. I think. I'm not going to qualify that. I think the biggest thing is sharing. Again, this is knowledge sharing. The openness of ideas, algorithms, data.
Okay.
Can you? I mean, you would literally transform not just the face of oil stuffs, but energy stuffs. If these big oil companies would start sharing what they know about energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think for all the years that I've been in this industry, I've never heard somebody say as many times saying something like, "This is proprietary."
Right.
People in oil and gas. No, you're right.
So it makes it sound like it's probably really, really special. You definitely can't have this. It's too awesome to let you have. Well, this costs a lot of money for us to come up with this, that kind of thing. I think it makes people feel a bit better about their stuff. Whereas if I show it to you, you might think it's rubbish and find me out. That's what I love about like open source and GitHub and the online community in general. It's just like, here's what I did, and it's so empowering and kind of humbling, and people are so positive about it always. Like, it's, I can't say always because obviously there is a lot of grossness on the internet, but I mean, if you make something and show it to people, 99% of people are super positive about it, and many of those people needed it and are grateful. Like, it's not just like, oh yeah, cool, good job, go you. It's actually like, oh, amazing, like, thank goodness somebody put that out, like, thank you. And you're like, what? But it was rubbish. Like, I nearly didn't bother. I nearly just shredded it or whatever. And one of the things that used to kill me was, trying to get people to submit abstracts or whatever for conferences, that kind of thing. Anyway, and the response you get is, oh, no one be interested in my stuff. And it's like this weird kind of, I don't know. I guess it's humility. I think people genuinely do think that people aren't interested, but there's sort of also the other side of that coin is that it's selfish, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how dare you hang on to your stuff? Like other people need that insight or knowledge.
Matt exists far higher on the altruism spectrum than I do, and we've everybody that listens to the show knows that. But my motivation is not only to shoot rainbows out at everyone, but is also to build things which are valuable and extract that value, right? So another big motivator for me in this sort of openness movement or whatever is that we build better stuff if everybody is sharing. And when we build better stuff, we sell more stuff. So yes, it's nice to share your GitHub repo, and so you'll have a couple contributors or whatever, but no one can use that commercially, right? It takes fit and polish. And so I do gain a great deal of satisfaction by giving away this is code now particularly, or data. But in the long run, it's also worth money to do that, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a strange dynamic about commercialization. Like someone on the internet, on Twitter today, was saying, kind of rolling their eyes at this startup, which has basically taken some sort of existing open source software, rolled it in a kind of new skin, turned it into a commercial offering, and this is the bit that kind of, it rubs me up too, this kind of behavior, essentially use that as a vehicle to attract investment from mainly governments, right?
That it started as an open source project.
Yeah, it's basically sort of, but it's this idea that when you wrap something up in marketing and commerce, now it suddenly can look like it's worth something, and then you can somewhat cynically use that, as startups do, to attract funding, and potentially you don't even need customers or a business model. You have to say you have a business model, but it doesn't need to exist. And especially governments at the moment are so, like, well, as usual, they're falling over themselves to fund things that look cool and sexy or whatever around, in this case it was information management, but I mean it could be just as easily be machine learning. I mean, you read all the time about a new startup attracting $10 million here, $25 million there for a machine learning offering in oil and gas. And some of their descriptions of what their technology does are absurd. I mean, they're completely impossible. But that doesn't matter. It's kind of like the little startup oil and gas companies that essentially just need to convince an investor or two for long enough to extract money from them. What happens after that is really not that important.
What does that have to do with open source? The same thing exists without that.
I just feel like I guess my point is that it's the same offering sometimes as something that is already open source that you can already use for free. But because it's commercial, it somehow looks legitimized and somehow has this different sheen on it that people are prepared to sort of invest in it. Whereas in open source world, often things like, I mean, take Wikipedia as a kind of example. I mean, people talk about it still quite disparagingly, and it looks like a bit of a basket case, like it's full of kind of lonely bearded guys hacking away in their bedrooms. But I mean, it's a massively influential website, and I find it incredible that a lot of people use, not just people, corporations whose people depend on it every day, don't donate to it. I think that's one of the most scandalous things going. I mean, and the you know, corporations with massive Linux clusters aren't donating to the Linux Foundation, aren't donating to the Python Foundation. I think it's appalling. It's amoral and unethical. And it's up to the technical people in those organizations to bring that sort of thing to light to those IT organizations and make it abundantly clear that can't go on. Lead by example, I would say, and donate, and strongly suggest that your employers do the same thing. You know,
that was a proper rant.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we got this weird. We're in still a really weird relationship with commercial software.
Do you think people making this commercial software whatnot have to continually reinvent themselves, or?
I just look at the relationship between most oil and gas companies and Microsoft. There's no logic behind it. Look at SharePoint. SharePoint's a disaster. It's a horrible piece of software. Every single oil and gas company I've ever been in is trying to coerce it into doing ridiculous things like manage conversations, manage document databases for knowledge sharing purposes, act as a wiki. It's horrible at all of those things. Everybody knows that. But somehow it's more legitimate than the clearly superior open source software that everybody else kind of gets, right? It's not just oil and gas. I'm sure it's the same in banking and stuff. Yeah. Somehow Microsoft has this sheen of legitimacy as a corporation with lawyers and marketing. I don't get it. It's weird. So it must be a weird human kind of just a fundamental thing that we have with like paying for stuff that says, oh, this is valuable, right? This is obviously, I'm not, this, I realize that I'm not like a sage or anything. I mean, look at why do people buy Jaguars and Lamborghinis, right? It's just a vehicle, but it's kind of an extension of that, isn't it?
I'm just glad I got you in a rant. That's check.
But you were asking what the oil industry should change. I like Graham's answer. I think as I feel sorry that there's not a better orientation of the oil and gas industry towards society and serving society. That makes me sad. You know, it makes me sad that I tell you what really makes me sad, and that's feeling embarrassed. Because I do feel embarrassed about working in oil and gas when it's something that we all depend on so much, and we've really messed up when we tried to fight the green movement, which has many excellent points that we should definitely listen to, right? And in polarizing ourselves against that movement, we look like a bunch of tossers. So
in that same line of thinking, speaking of openness, so if you actually had like one piece of data that somebody would consider proprietary, and if you could make it openly available, what would that be then? Like what's...
Well, I mean, there is quite a lot of data around. The problem with a lot of the data, well, I think.
Is the problem with openness the sharing of the process, or is the big holdup the data itself?
Well, both. I mean, it's a general problem, but with data specifically, the problem is that a lot of the data that exists is not sort of high dimensional enough. So there's like seismic but no well logs, or well logs but no core descriptions but no production data. Like there's very few data sets around, I don't know of any in fact, where there's a publicly available full depth data set. And it's a real problem actually. We used to hire people and go to consortiums and stuff at ConocoPhillips, and it's like, you'd have given people this data to work on, like, you know, they've got your 3D, say, and then they go and like spend, I don't know, 10 person years interpreting it and present their results back to you with these PhDs that they funded. and you're sitting there going, yeah, that's all great, but you don't have any of the production data or the core, so don't you? Do you know what I mean?
Well, this is not just a problem that's endemic to the oil industry. There's
no, I guess not.
I mean, we're discussing a common theme, a horizontal theme across industries, right? And that's like the canonicalization of your information, of your organization's information. And yes, the problem gets deeper and more complicated when the organization gets bigger, but forming some sort of system that's not true. Using some sort of system which disseminates information in some linked, meaningful ways is the key.
So you touched on the topic of companies having all this data and just passing it off to people to do the work. I guess that kind of goes into a question one of the listeners had. If you had to redesign how a consortium model works for university funding in applied geophysics, how would you do
it? That's for Matt. I'm out of the oil biz.
I mean, in general, I mean, it seems to me like a lot of the times, like either A, you have the data, you just don't have the time. You're trying to, ultimately you may not have the time to do it and you just have other things to worry about. So you pass it on to other people to do the work. Is there a better process to do this then?
Well, I mean, yeah, for me, I mean, there's probably all sorts of ways of coming at that question. But I mean, one thing that I think we don't do very well is collaborate. So there's a lot of like starting a thing over there and then maybe visiting it once a year and they come visit once a year, or maybe you get an intern for 2 months. I think it would be much better to create a deeper connection between the applied side and the theoretical side in consortiums and that probably means moving people around, which I recognize has got logistical issues associated with it. But sending the professionals from the funding organization into the research group, for example, for like weeks on end, maybe months, doing the same thing with the researchers, embedding them like that, like fun, for all the online stuff that I do and go on about, fundamentally face-to-face collaboration is that's where the real awesome stuff happens. And finding a way to do more of that, I think, would be a really good start. I used to call them internships and outturnships, like, and that those need to get more frequent and meaningful, so that there's more trust, basically, like, more openness on the collaborative, on the project. I don't think it's about money. And
it seems to me that your answer kind of segues into what training should be for new professionals. And I guess kind of going on that topic, it just seems to me like over the last couple of years, our industry has shifted more into this whole need for data science and coders. Years ago, I guess the listener commented how at AAPG someone stood up during a Q&A session and said that data science was a big black box of nonsense and that no one can stand up in front of their managers and defend its conclusions. Would you say that's how training is going nowadays with regards to data science? I mean, feel free to chime in, Graham. I mean, this is kind of what you're doing now.
Yep. I would suggest that what we need is not more data scientists. What we need is more curious people. The only thing that distinguishes someone calling them a data scientist from someone picking around in Microsoft Excel is curiosity. Investigate. If you have a question, follow up. Start playing with your crazy harebrained ideas. I mean, that's what a data scientist does, right? And yes, there are some barriers to entry. You have to know some technical things, but I would suggest that in the true spirit of scientific investigation, that even people who've never touched a computer could call themselves data scientists. Curiosity, investigate.
How do you train people to do that?
You don't. You can't.
Really?
No, I don't think so. I think I don't think you can. And I mean, not every person needs to do that, right? There's plenty of need for people to pick a thing and go forward on that thing, right? That's most of how things get done in industry, and I think that's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. Many people are very happy getting assigned a problem and figuring out how to implement it.
What sort of training, like how does Expero do training? Is there a formal system? Is it sort of every person for themselves, or?
It depends. Yes, there is a semi-formal system, but it depends on what kind of work you're going to be doing. So for instance, we'll take a front-end developer, right? So that person would work for a month or 2 months with a front-end developer, and then they'd work with a UX designer, and then they'd work in conjunction with the back-end team. And you kind of go around this cycle, and the whole time you're touching real projects, but you're under the tutelage of a guide.
Mm-hmm. So it's on the job then.
Yep.
Sounds like
yes.
Yeah. And this is working kind of in the next cubicle, or this is like pair programming, or what's the level of contact?
This is collaborating on projects in some cases, and probably initially, not what I would call pair programming exercises, but one-on-one code reviews, let's say once a day or 3 times a day or something, tick, 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 tick. And then as you develop into the role, you scale back that oversight, I guess, but you still have these meetings and you still do have review. I will say that this company in particular is not the best example of how to do training. Most of the employees we have are pretty senior level, like have been lots and lots of experience doing what they do before they come to Expero. But that's not to say you don't need to get up to speed on projects that are going on and the ways we do things. Now we do have interns.
Right. Yeah. How do you when you want to learn something new? You're a bit of a book guy, aren't you? You like to read the book. Do you do any MOOCs or do any other classes of any kind, or just do by hacking?
Most of 90% of what I do is just by doing it. Just finding something. And this kind of goes back to the question about side projects, right? So if I don't know how to do something, I'm going to go find an example of it, and I'm going to try to break it, and then I'm going to try to fix it. However, I have taken plenty of Coursera courses. I've, as you say, I read lots of books, literature every day, in a variety of spaces, right? But mostly literature searches only inspire ideas, right? And then you have to really go and dig into the thing. What else? Presentations. I think that presentations are worth a lot. I think going to meetups and conference sessions. Here we go. Here comes another rant. Conference sessions are worth something. I mean, you sit there for an hour and you don't learn much, right? But it's another inspirational tool to go learn and investigate on your own.
Which Coursera courses have you done, and do you recommend any in particular? So
I have done a huge variety, ranging from just for fun stuff like abstract algebra courses, all the way through things that apply directly to work that are, so I've done pieces of Andrew and Ng's deep learning course, So in particular, there's a section in there about triplet losses and doing one-shot learning. And so I actually went through and did the exercises and everything in that part of the course. Now, admittedly, I take pieces from these courses, right? I don't go through the entire thing.
Right.
And maybe that's a mistake.
Yeah, I don't know. I've actually just started the last segment of the deep learning.ai, deep learning specialization. And I'm glad I did it. I was partly motivated by the fact that we're doing a lot of teaching at the moment, and so I've been really keen to like see other people's teaching styles and tricks they use and methods and so on. And that was part of the motivation. But I also just was curious about, because I really don't have much theoretical basis for any of this stuff. And I'm, as many listeners will know, I've been sort of trying to teach myself linear algebra for the last couple of years. And I'm really glad I've done it. It's been really, really good. I really like his style. I like the equation representation that he sort of tends to favor. I get confused by a lot of the diagrams of neural networks and find the equations a bit easier to look at somehow. And yeah, it's been, I wouldn't say mind blowing, but mind opening at least. And the last segment's cool because it's sequence learning, which has been my sort of interest really for the last little while.
Really?
So yeah.
For what?
Well, I mean, I just feel like, we look at a lot of time series, and in geoscience, whether it's geological time series or recording time series, and I feel like
you're typifying the difference between the two of us right now. Because I'm like, what did you want to learn that for? And you're like, well, I was just interested.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what I want to learn it for, but I feel like some kind of recurrence, I guess you'd call it, in the sort of neural network world will play into how we solve problems in geoscience, where there's not just temporal dependency, but spatial dependencies. So the ideas like recurrence and convolution, I think, are going to be key. And
you can help Zoltan and I work on the stream predictor.
Yeah, that's a really neat problem.
This isn't in the news bullets, but I'll say it real quick in case anybody wants to join in. Zoltan and I are, and he's been working on this problem for a long time. I'm just jumping in as a novice, but he wants to figure out how streams meander over time, how that changes in the temporal domain. And I guess somewhat naively, we started chit-chatting about it one day, using deep learning to play into this experiment. And so we had a hack session Saturday night, and I'm on board, baby. I'm going to build some networks. He's prepping data. It's going to be cool. Yeah, there's a repo. If I think of it, I'll link it.
Well, he's the meander guy. So
most definitely.
Yeah, it's really neat. And yeah, anyway, so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I've been enjoying Coursera, and I also recommend Udacity, their courses. I've said many times that the Introduction to Computer Science with David Evans, it sounds really crass, but I mean, it changed my life, really. It was the thing that turned me from being a dabbler into someone who really wanted to learn how to program well, which I can't do, but I aim to keep getting better. Really excellent course, and he's a fantastic teacher, I would suggest. Top tip.
Well, gentlemen, we've been doing this for a little bit over an hour, and we still have a lot of questions to go through. But either way, like I said, this is something that Matt and Graham can answer looking at the show notes. But point being, we probably need to start winding down. I do have a couple of quick questions really quick that shouldn't take a whole lot of more minutes. One of our viewers wanted to know, what other podcasts or blogs do you subscribe to and why?
Oh, my favorite of all time is Car Talk. I think I've said that a couple times on the show, but I love Car Talk. It's I guess I was drawn to the content because even as a kid, I was working on mechanical things, engines and stuff. And I just love, and yeah, you're not learning a whole lot of content, but the guys are hilarious. And I don't know. So that's my favorite.
It's a podcast.
Yep.
I haven't
heard of Car Talk.
I feel like I have heard of it, but I don't know why.
Because I've said it 3 times on your radio show.
Okay, maybe that's all it is. Car Talk. Yeah, I've definitely never heard it. I don't know anything about cars at all.
The show isn't actually about cars. It's about life.
Oh, okay.
Cars are a vehicle.
I should give it a try.
Vehicle?
No, it's definitely.
Did anybody see what I did there?
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, one of the segments that we have in the podcast is we talked about the current books that we are reading. I'm going to change it up a little bit on the two of you. And a viewer, a listener wanted to know, what is your favorite book?
Nice. That is a really hard question.
That's why I'm here, to ask you these questions.
I read Atlas Shrugged when I was a young man becoming a professional person. And that really had a big influence on me. That's right up there at the top of the list. I'm going with Atlas Shrugged.
I've not read that.
What? Are you kidding me? Don't read it, Matt. If you read it, your whole personality is gonna change. Don't do it. Stay you. Stay you, baby.
Stay focused. Come on. Oh man, I find it incredibly difficult to pick a single book. I can't even say what. I mean, if it's the thing I've read most often, it's going to be a Tintin book. I really like Tintin.
It's easier to say things about books that were earlier in your life, right? Because you were more impressionable.
I guess that's right. Yeah, I mean, the things that had a big impact on me: Lord of the Flies, The Outsider. What else? Edward Tufte. Like, I do love those books. Like, if there was a book that I kind of wish I'd written, it would be like Envisioning Information or something like that by Edward Tufte. Like, I'm kind of jealous of those books. I think they're amazing accomplishments.
They are.
Well, yes.
Graham.
Yeah.
What is your favorite color and speed of African swallow?
Full throttle.
Well, guys, thank you for coming on tonight. That's our show. Please join us next time for episode number 72, which Tom.
We have a choice.
We have 72.
Matt, sign us off.
Why would you do that? What? Oh, there goes Graham. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And thank you very much, Fernando. You did an awesome job. He's slightly better at hosting than me, and slightly even better than Graham, I dare say.